In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to chip this, which is a ceramic insulator from a big power line, how to chip it into an arrowhead. Now I found this piece actually underneath a large AC power carrier, the big power lines, high tension power lines. It was underneath one of the towers. And this is just a fragment of it, but was, a big round disc thing. And if you look up on some of those big high tension power lines, you can see these around the towers. There'll be these big round disc things, and they'll be stacked up, sometimes 10 or even 15 of them on top of each other. And what they do is they create a gap in between the power line and the actual support tower, so that the electricity doesn't arc through and go down the tower and into the ground. So this was one, I guess they were doing some maintenance work or something and broke one of them, just dropped it on the ground, and I just happened to pick it up. And this stuff is a fired ceramic that actually does chip really well. It's very sharp, and you can make hunting points out of it. It's got a little bit of a graininess to it, so it's kind of like maybe a really fine grained quartzite, but it's very homogeneous, so you don't have any problems with cracks or any flaws in it. And it actually works really well. So we're going to get into it. Now this piece has these weird grooves in it. I guess they're spacers, so that when they stack these on top of each other, there's an air gap. That's the one thing we're going to have to get rid of, is remove these first, but that shouldn't be a problem. Now because this, as you can see, is at a little bit of an angle, I can just strike on this and take flakes off. Stuff actually works pretty well. And weird shaped pieces like this don't really intimidate me, because I'm so used to working some really weird oblong pieces of flint. It's what I grew up learning to work, because I was desperate for stone, that I've learned to be able to really take some ugly looking pieces of flint and turn them into some pretty surprisingly nice and functional points for hunting and for knives and all that. So I'm just using this hammerstone to remove any of these overhangs. I'm already bleeding, and I've only taken 3 strikes off this thing, so this stuff is sharp. Let's see now. A lot of what I'm doing right now is just trying to do basic shaping. Get a cross section established, so we can take some much longer thinning and shaping flakes off of this. I'm using my hammerstone also as a grinder to grind and dull that edge. I don't want it too sharp and brittle. I'm going to switch over to antler. You'll see me mix it up here with the tools. This stuff is somewhat brittle though. Even though it is a ceramic, it is a bit brittle. So you need to set your edges up correctly. Make sure they're ground well. I mean, even these little flakes you can turn into points. Hang on to some of those. I heard that the Australian Aborigines would, once they started putting telegraph lines across the outback, that the Aborigines would climb up to the top of the poles and they would break the insulators out so they could use them for projectile points. And so that the crews that came in to fix them would always leave extra insulators down on the ground, so that the Aborigines would leave the ones up on the power lines alone, because otherwise they busted them out, they'd lose communication. So doing some gentle edge prep here. Now I've got one problem here. I've got a ridge here that's on the surface where I'm going to strike, and I do not want that. I want that to be flat and clean. Where my hammerstone or my antler billet is going to strike, I want that to be, that surface to be nice and flat. I don't want any ridges or anything in there. That's much better. This is what I was working right in here. Now it's got a few little ridges, but nothing really prominent. And that's what I want. I just want that to be as clean as possible, so that when I go to grind that surface will be clean and that flake will detach cleanly. I'm going to grind this one pretty heavily because when I strike it on this side, that flake is going to have to take off that big heavy ridge. So we need that to carry quite a distance. And actually, because this stuff is so sharp, I'm going to use a leather pad underneath here because I'm going to be hitting this one pretty good and I don't want to slice my fingers open. So strike on the edge here and drive that ridge. Drive that, if we can get that fluted part off, that groove, will be all right. And that's exactly what happened. Look at how far it went. Went all the way across to that other side. Now we still have a remnant of one here that I'd like to get off. So we're going to turn this edge, chip it back, and then we're going to take another one off of this side. So same thing I just did before. I'm backing my angle back like this. I don't want to drive into it. I just want very short, steep flakes. I don't want that edge to be thin. I want that edge to be thick, so that it's strong and it's stout and can support a good heavy blow and transmit the energy through that ceramic and take that off. And this is all basically, it's the same as doing with flint. There's no difference whatsoever. It's just the material might be different, and it might have subtle differences in how it breaks as far as brittleness, but the concept is exactly the same. And if you get good at working really weirdly shaped pieces of stone, chunks where you have to come in at weird angles and in order to drive flakes into different areas and thin out that piece, it really opens up a whole world as far as different stones that you can use, and even smaller pieces that most people wouldn't even bother trying to tackle. You're able to do it and get some really nice points out of pieces that would otherwise just go to waste. All right, really grinding that one heavy there, using my leather pad, and I'm going to strike. So here's the ridge that we want to remove. I want to remove that ridge. I'm going to strike right in here, and my angle is going to parallel that. So I'm not going to be striking straight in. I turn my piece so that I can push that energy down that ridge. Let's hope it works. Okay, now it's not breaking off, and that's telling me that something's not right. Something is not right with this setup. I think I see what it is. My edge is more in the center, and I want this edge to be more to this side, more to the side that I want that flake to come off of. So that means I've got to chip off more of this ceramic and work into it even further. getting a little heavy, so I'm going to switch to hammerstone. I'm just doing really backing my angle off there. Okay, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to switch to a little bit different billet. I got a longer one here. It gives me a little more speed. I'm going to try to hit in there and drive that ridge again. And it did it. Just chipping into this edge a little bit. It's kind of chewed up in here. Got irregular surfaces. It's not good for a flake removal. Looking really good. I just need to get this off and get this little part off. We'll have a nice blank there. This we can flake over later. It's nice and smooth on this side, but this irregular side is what I want to get cleaned up first. Kind of broke the tip off there. That was weird. Not what I wanted to do, but you know what? I think there was, looked like a weird little crack in there. Yeah, I see one right here. That might have been what instigated that break. Sometimes that's all it takes, is just one little flaw in there, one little crack, and the energy goes through it and creates a weird vibration in there, and it can snap a tip off or a base off. It's okay. Got my edge again set up to this side. Try to drive that ridge this way and knock a flake off and remove that hump and that weird divot in there. I've had to sacrifice a little bit of size on this one because of the weird shape of this, and sometimes it happens. You got to sacrifice size. The weirder the piece is, the more reduction and shaping you have to do. You're going to end up losing some size to it, but that's okay. I like to learn and practice on pieces like this. It just keeps your skills sharp so that you really know, have your edge set up and your preparation correct. Another strike there. Hopefully we'll drive that ridge, at least part of it. Oh, missed where I wanted to hit. There we go. Well, got part of it, like I said. I think I showed you on one of my other videos, you guys, if you have a step fracture like this, it's not what you can do is you can put that flake back in there if it holds together and use it as a punch. You got to be accurate with your strike. I tap it in and look at that. So that's what we got off originally. And then when I put that flake back in and hit it again, used it as a punch. Look at what else it removed. It removed these two other pieces. Nicely done. Now we're getting a bi-pointed preform blade out of this. Now I want to start setting up my edges to really drive some flakes. So I'm going to do some pressure flaking on that, some real precise pressure flaking, so that I can set these edges up really well. This surface, the flakes are almost, the edges look a lot more ideal on this side, so I don't have as much work to do. Got this steeply beveled edge here. I'm going to grind this thing, and it basically is one long continuous platform from tip to almost to base, and I'll be able to pick which spots I want to hit, knock a few flakes off there. It should carry across the surface of this one side and really thin it out. Beauty, man, look at that. See what you, when you set your edges up correctly, that's why you spend a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, because that's how much mass you can remove in a millisecond if your edge is set up correctly. Look at that big thinning flake. It went almost all the way to the other side. I mean, it's beautiful. That's what you want. Now we do have a little bit of a problem with this stack. If you can see that, there were a couple of flakes hit and they stepped, so you've got this little cliff here. So I've got this platform set up, and it's heavy enough that I should be able to drive underneath it. I can get that energy to travel underneath it. I can take that off, really smooth that out, and I think it will work. So I'm going to strike right in here. It did partially. Still have another remnant of a platform here though. That should clean it up. Oh yeah, that did it. We got another little step there, but that's okay. Now I'm going to start using a smaller billet here because this point is getting thinner and I don't want too much shock, excess vibration. So I've switched over to a smaller billet. I'm going to start my first strike right in here. Accuracy is key. It went right in there. That's exactly where I wanted to hit. You really have to practice with getting your strikes to hit precisely where you want them to, so that flake will carry. Now I've got a little more mass in here. I'm going to need more weight, so I'm going to use the bigger billet. Finger underneath to support that flake. I'm going to move over just a little bit. I just nicked that edge. I'm going to grind it again. I'm going to strike right there and try to drive that thickness off of there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to move up here first. Oh, okay, that's not set up right because that flake should have detached, so it's telling me something's not right. So I'm not going to hit that again. I'm going to move down here and I'm going to hit this one. There it went. That flake broke apart, but went all the way across to right there. And you see how quickly you can thin that point down. Strike again right there. Finger underneath to support the flake. Now I'm going to be going in, my strike is going to go this way, not going straight in like this, because I wanted that flake to travel in here. So I have to do, my strike has to be in line with the angle that I want that flake to go, the direction I want it to go. So messed it up. Hang on. There we go. Well, I kind of biffed that edge a little bit. Might remove part of that glaze, but not all of it. It's kind of neat. I like it on there. I do want that side to have a little bit nicer flake scars and just balance out the point a little bit more. But hey, it's not necessary for this stuff to work or be effective. And I broke a little corner off of there because of that. It was kind of weird. This stuff is somewhat weak though. Ah, man, look at that. Huh. Like I said, this stuff is kind of weak and brittle. I've noticed the same if you're trying to make points out of a toilet porcelain. That stuff tends to be really brittle. Very easy to break, especially when you start getting it down thin like this. Start working it down into its final shape. Got the point roughed out. Much flatter, thinner. Lost some size to it, but that's okay. That's, like I said, that's what normally happens when you've got a really weird shaped piece of material you're trying to work into. But hey, we got something out of it, so we'll just finish it up, clean it up, and call it done. There it is, the finished spear point out of insulator ceramic. Spend a little more time on it since this video is going to be out in the world forever. I figured I might as well take a little time to make it a nice pretty point, but that's it. It's got good sharp edges on it. You could certainly use it as a knife or a spear, and that thing could bring down a deer or an elk, or a butcher one. So for any of you guys who are out there in possibly urban areas and chippable, knappable stone is not easily accessible, if you've got any of those large AC power lines, go walk along underneath the towers and see what you can find. You might be able to find some broken insulators like this, and they're great for chipping into points.